Dublin, because it has long been the administrative and financial capital, because it has experienced an influx of rural migrants, because it is one of the fastest growing cities in the common market in population terms, provides a good example close to home of the kind of problems which beset big cities. How did it arrive at its present stage? How has its growth over the centuries affected its modern problems? When we look at the present sprawling size of Dublin, it covers over 250,000 acres of land, it is hard to believe that it began as a tiny Norse trading centre on the high, easily defended ridge between Christchurch and Dublin Castle. St. Patrick's, Christchurch, and Dublin Castle are almost all that remain of Norman Dublin. Their proximity to one another remind us of the homely size of the medieval town. Plagues and famines helped to keep down the population, and the first map of the city, made by John Speed in 1610, shows how tightly confined Dublin was behind its defensive walls. High Street and Castle Street formed the central spire of the city, parallel to the south quays of the Liffey. Notice how far upriver the only bridge was. The recently founded Trinity College was then in the suburbs. It was not until after the Tudor conquest in the early 17th century that the first major expansion took place on land mainly confiscated from the old pre-Reformation monasteries. New bridges were built, land was reclaimed, and the port gradually moved downriver. New streets were laid out, especially on the north side, and by degrees the old city was left behind to the west. It slowly became poorer, and districts like the Liberties became centres for industries such as weaving and spinning, and for markets. Dublin, like all other cities, was dependent on outside supplies for its food. Moll's map of the city in 1714 shows the clear contrast between the spacious planned appearance of the new streets and the cramped, winding streets of the medieval core. The second major phase of urban expansion took place in the 18th century, when Dublin's wealth and prestige derived from two main sources. Firstly, the Irish Parliament in College Green and the associated government and legal offices, and secondly, the thriving commercial life of the port and the stock exchange. Dublin's civic pride and wealth were reflected in its fine public buildings, the Custom House and forecourts, for instance, and in the magnificent Georgian streets and squares. These were the townhouses for the aristocratic landowners who attended the Parliament. The city's population grew to about 200,000 in 1800. The prosperity was short-lived, however, for when the Parliament ended with the Act of Union, many of the Georgian houses were turned into tenements. Poverty had always been present in the traditional working-class districts, but now the once fashionable north side of the city symbolized the economic decay of the country and its capital in the 19th century. Disease was contagious in the overcrowded and unsanitary tenements, and the coming of the railways and trams from the mid-19th century onwards enabled the wealthier professional classes to move out to the suburban townships, such as Kingstown, Rathgar, and Clontarf. the city continued to become poor, and the population either declined or remained fairly static, unlike the British cities which experienced the Industrial Revolution. In fact, Dublin has only regained its status and prosperity within the last 40 years, as first industries and later office blocks were attracted by the facilities and location of the city. In the early days of the state, high migration from other counties swelled the population, and massive housing programs had to be initiated to cope with the inflow and in order to rehouse people from the worst of the inner city tenements. There were about 330,000 people in Dublin at the foundation of the state. This figure had more than doubled by 1971, and today, the custom of younger marriages, added to less emigration, means that Dublin's population is one of the fastest growing of any major city in the EEC. In fact, the population is estimated to increase to a figure of about 1.3 million by 1991 in the Dublin region, compared with the present total of about 0.9 million. Such rapid urban growth creates massive economic and social problems. The first of these is housing and the cost of building land. About 150,000 new houses will have to be provided for the increased population. And perhaps another 50,000 will be needed to replace houses which are at or near the end of their usefulness. The thousands of families who will live in these new houses will obviously need schools, shops, playing fields, hospitals, and the scale of expansion is so great that merely to add new housing estates to the edge of the suburbs would not provide a satisfactory answer.